Humans dispose of the dead in many different ways. It's really a defining feature of our species. Certainly, you won't find any other animals attending a funeral. But let's face it, compared to our ancient ancestors, we are pretty tame. They knew how to send someone off in style. Whether it's pyramids, kofun, ship burials, they were really flamboyant. But nothing says I'm a crazy ancient tyrant like forcing other people to die with you in some grand spectacle, human sacrifice. And that's exactly what happened in the ancient city of Ur 4,500 years ago. Ur is one of the oldest cities in the world, and it reached the height of its power in the 22nd and 21st millennium BCE. And in the 1920s and 30s, a British archaeologist, Sir Leonard Woolley, was excavating this city in the way that people did in the 1920s and 30s. What a jolly time to be a colonial overlord. Whilst excavating, he came across a grisly discovery: over 2,000 burials contained within this cemetery. 16 of them he identified as royal tombs just due to the wealth of the grave goods that they had inside them. So far, so typical for your average Bronze Age ruler's burial, but these graves also contained the bodies of dozens of soldiers and servants and people who were buried, presumably to accompany their master in the afterlife. Two graves in particular really stand out. Grave PG 789 contains 63 retainers and servants, and grave 1237 contained a massive 74 servants and soldiers buried alongside the inhabitant of the tomb. That's some Downton Abbey levels of servants they were trying to take with them into the afterlife. Here's Woolley himself describing the scene when he excavated it. The pit was roughly rectangular and was approached as usual by a sloped ramp. In it lay the bodies of 6 men servants and 68 women. The men lay along the side by the door. The bodies of the women were disposed in regular rows across the floor, everyone lying on her side with legs slightly bent and hands brought up near the face, so close together that the heads of those in one row rested on the legs of those in the row above. Crazy. The most I ever discovered on an archaeology excavation was a dog, which is still pretty cool, but it's not that scene. Bloody hell. Now, you might be inclined to think, as these were the most elaborate graves in the cemetery, that they belonged to a famous king or heroic warrior, but these were actually the graves of women. We don't know their identity exactly, but presumably they must have been a queen, a priestess. Either way, these were really important individuals to receive such an elaborate burial. Woolley believed that these bodies had all drunk poison, the proverbial Kool-Aid, before composing themselves for death. And he came to this hypothesis because there was a large cauldron in the tomb and they were buried with cups alongside them. Unfortunately, these bodies were really crushed just due to the huge amount of earth that was piled on top of them, and he wasn't at the time able to do any sort of decent medical examination to determine the cause of death. But nevertheless, he encased the best preserved skulls in wax, and they now live in different museums around the world, particularly Britain, America, and their native Iraq. Two of these museums, the British Museum in London and the Penn Museum in Philadelphia, decided to use modern CT scans to take a look inside these wax casts and see if they could determine the cause of death with modern technology, and they came across a really fascinating discovery. Fascinating but macabre discovery. Rather than being killed by poison, it seems that at least some of these individuals were killed with blunt force trauma. They specifically think it was from some sort of spike. The wounds are very small and circular, not the kind of wound that would be caused with an axe or a sword, and it's probably hard to really pierce someone's skull with a bronze spear. I don't know, I've never tried it before, but interestingly, in another tomb excavated in Ur, they found a weapon that would really fit the bill as a murder weapon. It was this axe, but rather than a usual axe head, it was made up of 3 short spikes, 1 long spike. I can't find a picture of it. It's in an archive in an Iraqi museum, but Woolley made a sketch, and here's my sketch of Woolley's sketch, just to give you an idea. What a grisly weapon indeed to be killed with. Blah. Gross. Now, the first question that comes to mind when you see this sort of large-scale human sacrifice is, were these people willing sacrificial victims? Certainly religion can make people commit suicide. That's really well documented throughout history. And if they indeed died by poisoning, that would be a very reasonable hypothesis. But I can't help but think the fact that they were killed by blunt force trauma suggests that these people were not willing volunteers. Certainly you're not going to find old Stefan and Milo volunteering to be bopped on the head with a copper spike. That's just not my scene. I'm going to skip church that day. Unless we find some clay tablet which describes the ritual in which these people were killed, we'll probably never know. That's very unlikely as it is, because the tombs have already been excavated. But let me know what you think down below. Do you agree with me? Do you think these people were forced into it, or do you think they were volunteers? Fortunately, the fashion for grand human sacrifices died out before Ur really became an empire, which for your average citizen is probably a good job. Who knows how many people a great emperor would have taken to the grave with him. That's it. That's all I've got for you this week. The sun's peeking out behind this tree, so I'm gonna go get some breakfast. If anyone tries to convince you to accompany them in the afterlife, don't listen, guys. There's a copper spike waiting for you. See ya.
Aubrey is so quick.